morning. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for spending your Saturday morning with us. Welcome to the 6th Urban Talk webinar by Pereka Bandar. This is our third webinar for the year 2021. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to promote Pereka Bandar's National Urban Design Awards, or NUDA. The purpose of this award is to recognize urban design projects of the highest quality and to encourage cities, towns, and communities across the country to strive for best practice in all projects. The National Urban Design Awards acknowledge the importance and impact of inter and multidisciplinary teams in the livability of Malaysian cities and the sustainability of our communities. We encourage the submission of multidisciplinary projects involving planners, landscape architects, and other disciplines. The awards offer the opportunity to receive prestigious national recognition from a jury of experts in urban design. The award recipients will receive featured media coverage in Pereka Bandar publication and website, as well as in the local press. So the deadline for nominations is December 4th, so there's still plenty of time. For more information, you can find the post about it on the Pereka Bandar's Facebook page, or you can visit our website, perekabandar.org.my. The title of our webinar this morning is Experiencing the City, How Urban Design Impacts the Lives of People. We've got a fantastic lineup of panelists this morning. Yasmin Lane, who is the city lead of James Walk KL, Rashidah Kamaluddin, the founder of Kota Kita, and Suhaila Abdul Rashid, a senior architect at JKR, the Public Works Department. Moderating the webinar is none other than Dr. Shuhana, the president of Pereka Bandar. Before we start, I would like to remind everybody watching on Facebook that we will share an attendance form and you will receive an e-certificate if you fill this in. You can also type your questions in the chat box and we will share them with the panelists. With that, I wish you a fruitful session. Over to you, Dr. Shuhana. You're on mute.
Yes. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And very good Saturday morning to everyone. Thank you for sharing your Saturday morning with us on the Urban Talk 6, where this time round we will be focusing on an issue that is often not given much emphasis and also not much consideration was given, but very important in urban design, which is the aspect of the experiencing city by those who are the user in the city. Now, if we look at the city, the technology of a city as like a computer, there is this hardware and the software. Much emphasis is given onto the hardware of the city, whereby we are concerned in the built aspect of the city, the infrastructures, the communication networks, and the software, which are the people who are living in the city, are usually being taken for granted as to how they would like to see their city being built, and to whether the people are concerned as to whether the city is providing them with the experience that is really needed to conduct their daily lives. So this morning we will be discussing this issue of how people are experiencing the city from various angles, and we have three panels who are working on in various manners to highlight the importance of giving concern towards the experience city and how the city can be made much more livable by focusing on this issue. Our first panelist is Yasmin. Yasmin Ahmad Munir from James Walk. Now, James Walk is an international movement inspired by Jane Jacobs. Everybody in the built environment actually quite aware of Jane Jacobs through her book, her famous book, Life and Death of Great American Cities. And it's very interesting to see that we have a KL chapter of James Walk here. So Yasmin, could you just tell us a bit about yourself as an introduction to this Urban Talk?
Sure. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. to talk today with this great panel from many different perspectives, I think, and led by a professor, of course. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I guess I've been working with cities. I don't know how to contextualize. I'm not a planner, I'm not an architect. I did study planning for my master's, but I wouldn't say I'm an accredited planner. But I've been working with the city, quote unquote, for the last 9 years in KL mostly, starting with working with groups like artists and designers to make the city more tangible, creating more engagement with communities. And I had a few years working with architects to make the city better. And now I'm back to working with planners. And my work actually involves working with a lot of the local government in Malaysia, the PBTs. And so it's kind of interesting in the last 9 years to see all the different, jigsaw puzzles of the city. And yeah, I guess, we started James Walk 2 years ago. I'll share more about that later, I guess. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Yasmin. Nice to have known you from this laptop. Our second panelist is Rashidah Kamaluddin. Now, interestingly, she is the founder of Kota Kita. Now we know that actually there is this NGO who's been working closely with the people to improve the quality of their cities, and she comes all the way from Kota Kinabalu, Sabah. It's good now that Pereka Bandar is actually expanding our discussion of the way the cities are being designed to cover also the east of Malaysia. Rashidah, could you tell us a bit about yourself, perhaps about your work with Kota Kita?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Shuhana, for addressing me. So happy to be here today, having this conversation on Saturday morning. So bits about me. I graduated from University of Malaya in architecture, and then I furthered my study in Master in Urban Planning in University of Melbourne. Currently, I'm still studying, somehow doing a gap year due to the pandemic. And during this gap year, I have formed Kota Kita, which is based in Sabah. So Kota Kita comprises of diverse people coming from diverse background. Mostly all are Sabahans that wish to advocate for better, resilient, and also inclusive city. Right now, we are focusing more on Kota Kinabalu and hoping to have further knowledge exchange between different organizations, and as we are doing today, this knowledge exchange with different friends from urban design and planning industry as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashidah. Nice to know you. So our third panelist is none other than Suhaila Abdul Rashid. She's a senior architect with the Jabatan Kerja Raya Malaysia, JKR, and also the Deputy Honorary Treasurer for Pereka Bandar. Actually, in this urban talk, she'll be wearing 2 hats, actually. She'll be speaking as an architect, a senior architect in JKR, as well as, being someone who is among the pioneers who set up this Pereka Bandar. So, Sue, could you tell everybody a bit about yourself?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Assalamualaikum and good morning, everyone. I'm Suhaila Abdul Rashid, and I'm an architect. Previously, I worked in private sector, and then I joined JKR in 2007. And after that, I continue my Master in Sustainable Urban Design under Prof. Shuhana as well. And during that time, I did research on safety, and I focused on light rail transit. So the experience from that research triggered me to continue with my PhD, because I found that it is a topic which is relevant, because we understand that the situation now, women are working, we expose ourselves to, the city experience and all those sorts of crime and whatever. So this is like a starting point for me to expand my research. And besides that, I've published a few papers related to my topic. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you, Shuhana. Now, before we get on with the discussing this topic, just a little bit about myself. So, I'm the president of the Nation Urban Design Association, and I'm very glad that I've got all my former students to support me to set up this organization, which we hope to become the one who's champions for good urban design in Malaysia. I am a retired professor in urban design from UTM, and currently I'm serving as an adjunct professor at UTM on a 1-year contract. I think even though I have already retired, UTM still wrote me in, to give some input to the program Masters of Science in Sustainable Urban Design, which I set up when I was in service. Okay, so that's it about myself. So I think we will start with our urban talk on this issue. I think our first panelist will be Yasmin. Yasmin, what is your opinion about the character and the conditions of our streets and urban neighborhoods that led you to set up this Jane's Walk in Malaysia, which I think is a very good initiative, very useful to the country?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, Jane's Walk is a global movement. So they've been around for I think 10 years maybe, and it really is a great idea. And it started off as an annual thing. Normally Jane's Walk is a festival that takes place in May, but because the response was so positive, we continued doing it every single month, just because there were so many new places to explore, which brings me back to your question, why did I do it? What's the condition and characters? So I think I'm going to start with the condition first, a bit of like bad news before the good, or bad side of things. I mean, we're all urbanists here. We all know what the ideal city is. And so when we walk around the city, I mean, we can't say the condition is great, right? I live in a relatively walkable, close neighborhood where I can distance-wise walk, but still I notice there's so many little things that obstructs my journey, and I'm an able-bodied, person. So if I'm being honest, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of little details that sadly gets overlooked. I think later we'll go into the whole, talking with someone from GKR as well, whose role is it to take care of those little details, right? How do we make sure every little thing is paid attention to? So yeah, I would say condition-wise, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for most, non-able bodies. And I think a lot of argument will talk about the heat kind of topic, which I think we can dive into together further later, because that requires a whole thing in itself. And I think relating to conditions, it's important to also think that to acknowledge that safety and good condition for me is different to everyone else here, depending on your age, depending on your status, even depending on if you have proper documents. If you think of the people that have to walk, what are the what do they consider decent condition? You see some people walking on highways sometimes. Is that decent walking condition? When you have to sort of thing. So yeah, I would say there's a lot to be overlooked, a lot to be considered, a lot to be improved. And sometimes it's the smallest thing. I mean, mainly it's shade. Mainly it's just making sure that that curb has a slope, or yeah, and then also there's like Pansu was saying on safety for women, how safe do we feel in terms of, so condition is a very big topic, I think, but my summary would be that it's not the best, but yet I personally walk, even if it is tough. I enjoy it. I kind of enjoy the challenge sometimes. Like I will intentionally stop a car if it's coming, because I'm like, you have a break, you should stop, I'm walking, which I don't advise. My husband hates that, but yeah, but in terms of the character, going into the positive side, I think we have beautiful things to offer. We have beautiful neighborhoods. If only little things were improved to make it safer, I think people would walk. And now with the pandemic and in lockdown, it's so beautiful to see people walking around their rumah, I mean, terpaksa lah, because you can't go anywhere else, right? But it's just kind of like, oh, the street is used for more than just cars right now, which is really cool. And so I think I used to live in PJ, and I think like the suburbs of PJ are, you'll find some hidden gems like an old cinema or a mural on the walk, and or like the old design of shop houses. So if you look through the history of James Walk in KL, it's never really like, oh, we're going to a specific historical site or something. We'll just go to any neighborhood. For example, Sungai Way. I used to live nearby there, and we would just talk to people in Sungai Way and ask them, what is it that's cool around here? Like, what would you showcase if you brought someone to this part of the city? So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. So okay, there's a lot of things to share. If only, like you said, the road conditions are being improved. Not just the road, the conditions for people to walk, the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said just now, we've been focusing a lot on the infrastructure for the cars, but
Yeah.
the people are actually also it's a vehicle, but we are not like the cars, we are not, we are very flexible.
Our needs are very different.
Yeah, these are different.
Yeah, but you do see some neighborhoods that are walkable, and then you think, wow, this is so refreshing. I think it'd be interesting to study some of the good case studies that we do have, even if there are not many. And sometimes it's the older suburbs, I find, built back in the day, like in the 60s. We did a walk in Taman Melawati. And I'm not from KL, that part. Oh, okay. It's kind of cool how the shops are oriented. The whole idea is to walk in the back lanes and stuff. So things like that, we don't have to, it's impossible to scrape a city and rebuild, but how do we adapt? How do we, so.
So there's a lot of improvements needed, okay, in that aspect. So I'll catch back with you after this. We'll move to Rashidah first. You have set up this Kota Kita, like I said. Why do you feel the need to set up this Kota Kita in advocating for more urban resiliency and inclusivity in the cities?
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Shuhana. Kota Kita has recently just been established, March this year. So we are very young, newly formed advocacy group. Why we focus on inclusivity and resiliency? Because we believe that when we enhance the inclusivity, we can enhance the resiliency as well. Somehow it's like very interrelated, because we believe when a community has strong inclusivity, they have stronger bonding and networking between them, not just within the community, but also with the authorities and other organizations. So when we have that strong networking in facing global challenges, then we can we have strong that resiliency. So for example, like right now we are facing a global challenge, which is a pandemic. So we believe that if we enhance the inclusivity of the community, then the community will be able to face these global challenges better, be able to bounce back better. So that's the general core idea of Kota Kita. And the starting point of Kota Kita is also because what we saw during the third wave of the pandemic in Sabah. In Sabah, we faced a lot of challenges, like in terms of infrastructure. So during the third wave, it was really difficult here. And somehow the infrastructure are not in a good condition. So it doesn't really assist the medical healthcare group to assist people even in the urban area, it's difficult to access. So it makes it really difficult. So we thought, okay, we have to do something about this. It's time to change. And people were talking a lot about infrastructure in Sabah, and the limelight was on us. So we thought, okay, it's time to, go on with the momentum, drive it further. And even in Sabah context, this course is still quite new. So we're trying to facilitate further the knowledge exchange between Sabahan to educate and create awareness. And also, of course, knowledge exchange and to get more guidance from those who are really already established, such as Mereka Bandar itself, Urbanized Malaysia, I think City. So that's why we set this up. And the thing is to further empower youths and also community. Because we believe that somehow community, they understand the city and their neighborhood better. They are the experts. Of course, as professionals, those who study in built environment, we understand it in different view. But then the user themselves, they have different worldview because they experience the city themselves. So setting this up is in order to engage, be a medium between the community and also the authorities, and to inform the community about how they can communicate their experience, communicate their concerns, and also letting them perhaps put it into context, make it into some special terms, so it's easier to communicate with the authorities. So that's basically what Kota Kita is about.
Did you get to influence the authorities on what the opinion of those communities about the city?
Not yet. We
Not.
are moving towards that, but
Yeah, I think it
we have
would be interesting, yeah, if you could become, like I said, the media, because most of the time that's why in the past we normally refer the local authorities as the city fathers. They are the one who decide what is best for the cities, and the users are actually the one who are just going to be the receiver at and even though there are things doesn't work out, I mean, you just accept it. Do you foresee that Kota Kita could be the one who can actually bring out all the voices of the people, to make them being heard, and also to be responded by authorities? Would that be your idea, vision in the future?
Yes, that is part of the vision and mission. We have just recently networked with quite a lot of other organizations that help us to connect with also DBKK and other authorities. So we're looking forward to work with them, seeing how this can be established further. Yes.
Okay, good job actually, Rashidah. I mean, I'm very interesting that we have people like you, who take this initiative, because like I said, if you want to create sustainable cities, sustainable communities, there should be a good communication between the one who plan and design city and the one who are actually the on the receiving end, which are the users. Okay, we next move to our third panelist. Suhaila, I've known her for quite a long time. She used to be my former student, and she continued to be my student even in her postgraduate days. Now Sue is actually like you said, you're now actually reading PhD at UTM and doing research on the safety for women. I think probably would like to you to share a bit on what you have found so far about the experience of women in using in the city, and how do you see our cities fare in providing a safer environment for women?
Okay, thank you, Prof. So far, we have all those policies and plans in Malaysia. Like we already have a government transformation plan. We have a safe city program. We implemented SEPTAT and other strategies. But we are not focusing mainly on a safety aspect, because all these policies or plans are just continuation from what United Nations have proposed. So it is like obligatory for every country to come up with their own, or to continue from what has been proposed. And then I think we need to have our own framework, because in Malaysia, the demographic is different, the culture is different. So we need to focus on what do we need for our citizen, because we can see, like for example, in KL, demographic is different if we compare to maybe Singapore or Indonesia or in Japan, or maybe the safest country like Sweden and Denmark. We can't simply copy their framework. That's why I think we already have all those things, but the way we execute, and then the governance and enforcement, so we are still lacking in that area, I think, because what we did is just a copy paste, and then we don't have a really focused strategy. It's like a piecemeal, even if you look at the new KL structure plan, the draft 2040, there is no specific aspect for improvement for the urban environment for women. We only have for the sidewalk, lighting, that is only the basic needs, but we need to implement beyond that. That's why when we want to come up with a strategy or plans, we need to look at spatial level. What is the needs of the entire citizen? What are the needs of the vulnerable group? What are the needs for aging population? What are the needs for working group?
and for the youngsters. So it looks like our strategies and plans now are only for a certain group or one that fit for all, but it is actually not like that. It's beyond that. So we have to consider the inclusivity, like what Rashidah just said just now, and then what are the specific group needs. Because if we go into the ground, we can see that it's not just any woman who use the street. We have different age group, and then we have mobility issues, and then we have the occupation. So the time and space is different. So we can't use one simple strategy for all. And then it is different from KL and Penang or Malacca or in Kota Kinabalu, because I'm sure in Kota Kinabalu they have an extra demographic group. So we can't have only one guideline that we can fit everyone. Yeah, but so far I think, yeah, we have implemented SEPTED and Safe City program, but I'm sure we need to improve a lot, because what we did was just like, I think since it was launched in 2010, I think 150 local authorities have implemented this Safe City program and SEPTED, but we need to review every maybe 3 years, depending on current needs. Yeah, Prof.
It's interesting that you chose to do your research on safety from the women perspective. I think because there is this saying that if a woman feels safe to be in the city, then the city will be safe for everyone. Because women, by nature of the gender, is actually the most vulnerable group in the society. And like what you said just now, there are so many conditions for women, because we have when the woman is pregnant, they have a different problem. And when they give birth and they have a baby and a toddler and they have to push the stroller, then this is a different kind of condition which require different needs. And that's why if you design and build a city which is safe for the women, you'll be sure that the other groups will be safe, because from the women perspective, they're covering all sorts of conditions that requires to pay. And it's very interesting that you raised about the issue of the gap between having a program for safety and the execution of the program, because the success of any programs or policies is depending on how it's been implemented and what is the feedback and the response that you have from those the program is targeted to. Okay, we'll go back to Yasmin. And to let you share with us again about this issue of walking. Why do you think? And there's another. Throughout my research in this area for the past 30 years, when I was at university, I've come across this saying, from one of the local authority. I think it's a planner in the local authority. I can't remember which local authority. He said to me that, in Malaysia, there's no point to provide pedestrian pathways because people in Malaysia are so lazy to walk. If possible, they want to drive into the shop, and so that they can just park inside the car and then just go out and shop and then they go, because they're so lazy to walk. Now, Yasmin, I'm going to throw you this question. Why do you think the people in this country do not? Is it fair to say that people in this country do not prefer to walk in the cities and instead more attracted to drive to shopping malls or to drive to places even though they are within walking distance?
Yeah, when you threw this question at me a couple of days ago, it struck a chord. I think to dissect further this word attracted, right? Like you said, the planner in the local government, conveniently says, oh, well, people don't want to walk. People are lazy. And maybe from his perspective, they've tried to design walking facilities and people still didn't use it. But, it's not enough to just place these so-called facilities. Like we've been discussing the first round just now, there's so many different needs, there's so many different things to consider. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, are people really attracted to driving, or is it, is it form is it form that follows function? Meaning we've designed cities that
Make people lazy to walk.
It makes people lazy to walk. It makes it so convenient to drive. I mean, I have to, I had to condition myself as well. Like, okay, you know what? It's near. Okay, fine. It's hot, but there are trees. Okay, I bring an umbrella. That sort of thing. It's a reconditioning of society. It's a huge behavioral shift. I mean, we have to address the fact that, yeah, maybe all of us here in the panel have one way of looking at walking in cities, but not everyone shares the same. Not everyone has the same issues, has the same, challenges. For example, if they have a lot of kids, how are they supposed to walk, etc. Right? But I think, of course, we've designed out walking. And so how do we design it back in? And I think when we talk about why our cities are so car dependent, you can't shy away from, looking at the history of when our cities were developed and how it was developed at a time that, cars were the king, right? And even now our industry is so tied to cars. And so for us to shift from that, there's not just the community that we have to convince, it's also the kind of bigger invisible hands of the market, right? Sorry to take your question and take it so big. But I think it's important to ask people, like we as planners, as urbanists, we tend to assume, why are people lazy? But if we ask them, are you lazy? Why is it that you don't walk? It's a conversation that needs to happen to shift behavior, and behavior change when it comes to sustainable development, sustainable urbanism. I mean, there's so many theories to understand societal change. There's all sorts of, theories. But one of my favorites is the value belief norm. You shift people's values and their beliefs, and eventually that, if you make it convenient enough, it becomes a norm. So there's different elements. You can't just provide the facility. You have to also have that social shift of saying, okay, if you walk, what's in it for you? So for some people, that incentive might be, oh, you'll save money on petrol. That's the incentive. For me, it's like, oh, climate change is too real for me to be driving, but that's for me, so I think that rethinking has to happen, in order to understand why is it that people prefer to drive to malls. And of course, design plays a huge role. It is so easy to get in your car, to get to a mall. I mean, now that we're not going to malls, I think this is the time to really really nudge people and say, look, we don't need to go to malls. We can, I mean, the beauty of being able to walk to your 5-foot way and Kedarunchit nearby, that social connection that you have when you go to these close places. I mean, of course, COVID makes that difficult to have your interactions when you walk to your shops and stuff. But yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why people don't like to walk. And there's also not a lot of options. When you walk, you have to lalu that one jalan that's really busy and bising. There's no pedestrian access for you. There's no zebra crossing where you're ensured to be safe. And if you have a stroller, you can push that stroller without worrying. So I think providing more options as well, asking people what is it that will make the journey of walking more enjoyable, a fountain, I don't know, things like that. It's interesting if you see now in the city, there's more micromobility around, like electric scooters. So things like that aid the process of walking, because we can't deny KL, some parts of the day it's hot, some parts of the day it's raining. And when it rains, how are you supposed to walk, So we need to have, good buses and really protected cover, things like that yeah. So I think it's an interesting question that I can go on and on. But yeah, I think it goes back to stop making assumptions and try to relearn and rethink as a society. What's too hot for me, for example. Am I willing to sweat a little bit every day? Which maybe a couple of years ago we don't like to sweat. We stay in our aircon room, we go to our aircon mall. But if you think about it, sweating is really healthy for you. So it's just things like that we, and if you think about why, this again assumption, but French people are so slim and beautiful and so young, because they walk everywhere. I mean that's the kind of argument. Okay, you walk, you're gonna get slim. So it's all about finding how do we win people's hearts. Because I've used the climate change argument, and it doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone wants to be, confronted with with the reality of that sort of thing. So yeah.
So I mean, it goes back to this man environment theory, because man and environment, there's a symbiotic relationship between the two. What the one did to the other will actually comes back to the person. I mean, this brings me back to Winston Churchill saying after the World War, when they were trying to rebuild Britain after the war, he said, okay, today we built the cities, tomorrow the cities will shape us. How you build the cities will actually create the kind of people. If you design your cities not to be walkable, then you will find the people living in the city will be people who don't enjoy walking, because it is a response. It's just a response to the kind of cities that you build. So I think we cannot just blame Malaysians for if really they do not like to walk. It's because we do not probably provide the environment that make it conducive for them to walking. So
and we don't ask them what it is that they
yes,
conducive. So with Jane's walk, we found that after a couple of walks, people not insisted, but it just kind of happened where we stopped to makan along the way. Now, the original Jane's walk is that we just walk for an hour and a half. And then suddenly, maybe the third walk, we just stopped at a kedai ayam penyet or something. And for breakfast, we were having ayam penyet. And I thought, oh, okay. And then it became like a habit for our walk. And Malaysians, I think, we love to have that little, okay, ada gerai sekejap, beli papadam, whatever.
But they will not make Malaysian healthy then, because when you walk, you sweat, and then you're going to eat, you pile up.
It's better than driving to get your goreng pisang, So at least you burn a little bit. I mean, I'm just saying that also provides, livelihood, liveliness on the road, which will address the eyes on the street thing, right?
I think that actually what we are saying, this one actually has something to do with Suhaila's concern about safety, because the more people walk on the streets, the streets will be much safer, because there are people and there are on the streets, and there are a lot of eyes keeping a surveillance on the street. Okay, thank you, Yasmin, for that. We'll catch on a bit after this. So Rashidah, you were saying just now, you were mentioning about the concern of the youth about their cities, and how much the youth are actually really interested in what kind of cities that there is being planned for them. So what do you think about the youth city involvement in how the city is being planned? Will that improve the quality of experience the city will provide for the youth?
Okay. So for youth, I did a bit of research, which is actually 45% of Malaysian population are youth with the age from 15 to 39. So that is a huge chunk of demographic just for youth. And because of that, I believe that they actually have the power and potential to be a driver for change. And it's important for us to empower them. And then looking at how Kota Kita and myself have been involved with youth recently, we started seeing that youth are using a lot of social media in creating more advocacy. So for example, like maybe I should share a bit about Kota Kita. So Kota Kita comprises of another 15 youth from diverse background. And not everybody is from built environment. Actually, more than half of us are coming from law, psychology. We have programmer as well from mathematics. A lot diverse. But these youth are a group of people that are very interested in their own city. They are interested in how they want to live in the city, how they want to experience the city, and they are also looking into how the future generation will perhaps experience the city in the future. So they are thinking very ahead. And also when let me go back to the social media part. Like we've been interacting with youth in social media, a lot of them in social media, and we realized that digital storytelling is very effective actually in communicating with people. And then from there we've learned that all of us have different experience, and then a lot of youth have also ventured a lot out of Malaysia, and then they experience different city as well, and they actually want the same thing. For example, efficient public transportation, and probably like Yasmin mentioned a lot about walking just now, and then they mentioned a lot about walking, and then they realized that hey, actually walking is a good thing. It's not just about getting to destination, but it's also about the journey. And we started appreciating this thing, and these things are coming from youth. They have different worldview. I guess it's because of the um, social media and all the internet, somehow just this flattening of the world, where we also see what's going on the other side of the world, and the youth want that. And we tend to get inspired by issues that are directly affecting us. So as youth realize these sort of things, they are much more enthusiastic to make a change. And also as I engage with them, I realize that these people do want to make a change. They want to contribute, but it's about a matter of platform. So when we talk about cities, it's not about if whether youth want to raise their voice or not, but it's either cities are able to provide such platform, such potential, as such platform opportunities, and also be able to tap into this potential to create spaces for dialogue and also consultation. So I think it's very important to provide this opportunity lah.
I think probably Kota kita at you as a group would really appreciate this community design approach where you can work with the community on any design of planning of any project, because from then on there is the real input that can be given from these various groups into the kind of environment that is being planned for them. Because I think one of the major criticism in the way we operate, especially in these developing countries, because we normally do our public participation, like Suhaila was just commenting, we're just doing like a lip service. We have the aspect of public participation. It's just like informing people, no, you're going to do this project, but the public doesn't really get involved, in actually voicing out their concern or their preference in the redesign. So I think we should, I don't know whether you agree with me that we should have more of this community design or advocacy planning approach, whereby then you can really get people to be involved, and this notion of sustainable cities will be more meaningful if we go into this direction. Do you think so?
Yeah, definitely. But it's right now it's a matter of creating, that framework in order to make people work together. What are the sort of methods to be able to, implement that? Yes.
Okay. We just have to push people. The country to go towards that direction. So if people like you, I mean, we have the younger generation who have this kind of vision and this kind of ideas, I think we'll be heading somewhere good in the future. Okay, back to Suhaila. Talking about this safety issues, because safety is very important. I mean, this to us in our country, we feel that we're not really quite our cities are really not quite safe, unlike cities like you mentioned just now, Sweden or Japan. Like I'm a former professor, a friend of mine who's a professor in Meiji University. He said to me, if he were to do a research on safety, nobody will be interested to hear, because Japan, the cities in Japan are so safe, unlike us. So what are the major constraints do you see in in designing safer streets and cities for women here in Malaysia?
Okay, I used to work in private sector, and I'm now working in a public sector. So I've seen both worlds. I've seen how developers are trying to get away with abiding law or compliance, because we have all these bylaws and whatnot, but sometimes the developers just complying the minimum requirement, and then it comes the issue of governance. We have a federal level, the secondary layer, and then we have local authority who implement all these plans and policies, but then we are still lacking in terms of enforcement. We should really enforce what the requirement that developers need to follow at, for example, at planning stage or development order. This is the first stage that we need to look at all these requirements. If we really want to enforce or implement the safe city program or SEPTED, this is the stage that we need to comment. We can't just sometimes a developer, they have a way, they don't mind paying the fine, or they try to waive. So at authority level, they should really enforce if this is because they are the one who have the final say. It's not the federal government, because federal government, they just provide the policy, but the one who involved directly is the local authority. So during my research, I found that this is one of the issue in Malaysia. We have all those thick policy, we have strategies, we have vision, mission to provide livable city. We have urban forum, national urban forum in Malaysia, but the execution is what we can say is fail, totally fail. But I would like to thank a few certain authorities whom I've known that they have tried their best to provide some safety features. But then it comes another aspect where sometimes the citizen of that area who don't want to have those features, because this is what happened in a certain area. It's not the developer, but it's the citizen who, because they want other things. So I think that when we talk about livability, experiencing the city, these are a complex issue. We have to look at spatial level. We need commitments from everyone, especially consultant as well, because consultant are paid by the developer. So there's an issue here because we don't have urban designer in Malaysia. Do we have? I think it's not a major field now in Malaysia, urban designer, because we have authority, but most are planners, which is good. But we don't have urban planners and urban designer who look at the spaces in between, because when we submit for any projects, we only look at our compound. There's no interaction between our site and adjacent site. So there's no contextual consideration, ground floor planning, ground floor interaction. So this is where urban design comes. So I think there's an issue here because still a major constraint in Malaysia, this governance, enforcement, and awareness from consultant and also public. They should voice out what they want, because I think when like local authority or DBKL, when they announce that they will pin up a poster or some new intervention, we should go and comment. We can't just, after it's been implemented, then at later stage we comment. We put it on Facebook. We are not satisfied with this. We're not satisfied with the sidewalk, with the lighting or lack of CCTV. We should do our part. And I think it takes a whole nation actually to create a safe environment or a public realm for all. It's not just the local authority or the government, because everyone should have more awareness. Yeah, instead of complaining, we should ask ourselves, what can we contribute at our level, even a small contribution. I think, and then we need to have more maybe program to make public aware that, okay, what is the channel that we have? Do we go directly to local authority or the federal government? So this is, I think it's a complicated issue, because during my research, I found that the constraint is not from only one parties, it's overall, Prof.
Okay, it's interesting that you raised that problem about the implementation of policies. I mean, I agree with you that we've got lots of policies. We are very good at producing development plan, structure plan, local plan, whatever. We are really at par with the countries in development. But when it comes to implementing something else, and if you look at here in Malaysia, our development control system is not as not very strong as compared to the other countries. I mean, it's quite easy to get planning permission provided you just fulfill certain conditions like the density, plot ratio, or whatever. And we hardly had a design control stage before planning permission, full planning permission is given. Unlike in UK, most of the time they have the outline planning permission, which is just to check on the kind of the development, the type of land use, whether it complies with the policies. But then the design control is the one that is giving a hard job to the client, to the developers and their architects to get planning permission, because they'll be scrutinizing the design. They'll be checking whether all the bylaw requirements with regards to the needs of the disabled, safety, heritage values and so forth before permission is being given. I think we really need that in this country. We need a very foolproof checking system before any development is being allowed to be built. Because I agree with you. Once is the development is being done, then I mean it will have spent, if you want to improve it, you will have to be spend a lot more money into it. That is not sustainable, isn't it? You should, I give a good example, like the needs of the disabled. We have this People with Disability Act for the OKU, and you can see buildings still not complying with those bylaw requirements, and yet they still get the permission to build the building. And then when you audit the building, then you suggest them to retrofit the building to comply with the needs of disabled. Isn't that a waste of money? In the first place, the building shouldn't be built if it doesn't comply with the needs of the disabled. If it's not safe, because when we talk about the disabled, it also relates to safety, isn't it? Because I remember talking in one of my research to an official from Queensland University Technology in Australia. They said in Australia, if you don't comply with the people with disability requirements, they will not be allowed to get permission to build the building. I think we need to have that very tough kind of a government control system, so that the checking will be done thoroughly, and then only buildings or only development that fulfill all these requirements that we've been talking about is allowed. Do you agree with that?
And we need political will as well.
Yeah. Everything cannot happen without without that. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Do you mind if I just jump
Yeah,
in?
it's okay.
About
Yeah.
like the design control. I mean, I know in some cities, you almost have I don't know how you call it, like a external body to oversee, like in
design review panel. In America, they call it a design review panel. Somebody to check on this.
But who would be on that panel, right? Would it be experts? Because who would then listen? Because supposedly the planners are the experts. So how do you
experts
to say, okay, no, you're not the expert, these people are. And I guess just reflecting, I love this conversation because I think all of us are like really on the same page with how we see things. But I guess would it come from the stakeholders itself? Like the panel would need somebody with a disability. We would need someone who's a woman. We would need someone. Who would make up the design control panel here, do you think, for it to be effective?
I think, I don't know. Sue, you've got any suggestions? But if you look at the experience in US, because I've been interviewing a few local authorities there, San Francisco, Baltimore, and a few others, the design review panel are normally people, very credible people, who are, like we said, are really experts, and they are the one who will be scrutinizing this, especially projects of public interest, because the projects, buildings of public interest you cannot just let anybody just to sift through. But in the situation like in UK, any projects that comes to require planning permission, they have the local authority themselves are well equipped with professionals who be doing this job. For example, in I think Glasgow City Council, they got about 60 planners just in one section, and then like in Nottingham City Council, they will just have one planner to be taking care of one housing area or one district, to that level of detail. So the planners are so engage with the area that they are responsible to, and if any new development that comes in, they're really very concerned as to how it will affect the neighborhood and so forth. And I remember that in UK, you can even not get planning permission if you do not use the right brick color, as part of the building material, because
Very
it
familiar,
doesn't,
yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
fit in with the context.
But I think that's
that is the
also
kind
risky, going back to the English planning system, because there's a lot of gray area when you talk about planning as well, right? You can't have that brick, but then you can have this brick in this code. There's a lot of like, I think they call it Tai Chi, right? In the planning world. You can Tai Chi here, you can Tai Chi there.
But at least the architects and the developers, will face a tough job, to get a permission, and they know that, unlike here in Malaysia, I think, it's very, very. I remember one architect that I interviewed asked me, where you come from? I said, I'm from Malaysia. Oh, it's a heaven for us architects there, isn't it? Because you can just do what you like. The planners that are so nice. They allow all sorts of they can allow all sorts of buildings to go up, unlike the planners over here in the country. Okay, for Yasmin, your third and last question would be that, what do you think? Because you're talking just now, we're talking about the walkability of cities, is that it's just not enough to provide a pavement or a sidewalk or walk, but the conditions, the way it's been designed, does influence how people would choose to walk. So what do you think are the major constraints in making our cities walkable?
I think, again, we've touched on the points that I'm about to say a few times, having more participation. And I love how Rashidah was saying how, they're creating a framework of participation, because sometimes you can use the word participation. I think it's becoming popularized in the Western cities now, this participatory planning, community inclusive planning. But who are participating? Who is there? So we cannot also take for granted another buzzword coming up like participation, because it's not that direct to create. So I think one is what we said about having more participation in how cities are planned to be more walkable. Of course, design is I'm not the expert here on urban design, but design is so super crucial. But it's the pre-design, I think, the pre-thinking. Even when we design new suburbs now, you think, wow, you had the chance and the money, and this is it. Like, I'm sorry, but I mean, if anyone feels offended, but and I think one of the biggest constraint is, again, going back to what we're saying, this working in silo. Planners don't talk to architects. Architects don't want to talk to the local government. And everyone thinks they're an expert. Everyone has their ego really, really strong. And we're not, so if, for example, we're planning a new city, the planner thinks, no, we need to make it more walkable. We need to reduce crowds. Architects, okay, I love that, but I want to make it really pretty and but also practical. The local government's thinking more about maintenance, because that's what is going to affect them in the long run. Do they have money to preserve this design? But if you kind of take a step back, I don't know how to do this. I think it was interesting when you said dulu the local authority was the father of the city. I think we need more mothers. Mothers, but we need mothers, because that's the mom is the one that will tell, okay, guys, sit down, talk, have food, and just talk about it. Because I think that's what's really lacking here, and I think I see it in other cities as well. I grew up with my mom is an architect, so I've kind of been exposed to the architecture world. And then when I got to know planners, I was like, oh, why don't you guys talk to each other and solve all these problems, So I think that's a huge thing. And if we go back to the drawing board and realize at the end of the day, we have the same goals. And we're all working towards the sustainable development goals, right? We've got 10 years to achieve these SDGs, and under the SDGs, there's the new urban agenda, which kind of outlines all of these things to create a sustainable city. So what my main work we're trying to do is trying to build capacity amongst local government to follow the SDGs, to realize it's aligned with what you want to do. So if we all have a common goal, I think, we have to address this working in silo, and that common goal might be the recipe. And then another constraint, if it's okay for me to share a few more, just if I'm going too long. Again, what we've been saying on implementation. And this also is solved by talking to each other, because I said we have the planners, the architects, but we also have the law enforcers, the police, the guy, the shops, the garage owners, etc. So I think there needs to be a better ecosystem. And I love like what we've been saying about involving everyone and hearing everyone's views, and everyone is an expert sort of thing. But that is also very tricky. We cannot take for granted that saying all this is lovely, but implementing it is tough. I mean, if you've ever been to a town hall meeting, you know, like it's not easy. So yeah, we just focus on sustainable development, the goals. And I think my last point is also echoing what I've been saying about, you know, understanding that it is your right to walk, to have the right to walk. We take for granted that actually this is our right as a we pay taxes. You know, even if I don't drive, my money goes to fixing the car, fixing the road that is caused by the car. So if drivers say, oh, but you know, you cyclists, you don't pay tax, that's not true. We all pay tax. And so we forget that it's in our power, actually. It's in our power to demand. And I think that's, you know, one of the constraints is like what Pansu said earlier, you know, people don't know what the channels are. Where do you complain? And if you complain, will it be heard? Do we have efficacy in what we're saying? So I think that's one of the constraints that I'm glad to see that it's changing with so many more. I mean, Kota Kita is great, and there's a few really great, you know, urbanists springing up, cyclists. And when you talk about the city, you cannot say, oh, this is mine, you know, you have to share, because there's so much to do. I get really frustrated with planners that say, oh, but this is my area, you do that. Like, yeah, but there's food security to think about, there's cycling infrastructure, there's safety, there's so many things in the city that we all need to work together. So that's my last point about.
Okay. Thanks, Yasmin, for that, sharing that. Okay, Rashidah, we have to go very quickly after this. I've been warned by the organizer to keep time on the time. So Rashidah, what does it take to improve the quality of experience that provided by the cities to the ordinary people on the street?
To answer these questions, I guess we have, I would like to share the stories that I heard from the street law, because we're talking about ordinary people. So we should refer to ordinary people. So far, Kota Kita have talked to a few people on the street. We went on the ground and we actually interviewed them. So among the stories are like, we talked to this one woman. She's doing food panda delivery, not using motorcycle. She's using a bicycle and she walks. But then when we asked her, do you feel safe moving around the city while doing the delivering? And the first thing she answered was like the comparison between walking and also cycling. She said walking is better than cycling. It's much more safer. And also she also touched on the possibility of being harassed while she was doing the delivering. And she also mentioned about how her friend was chased down the road while she was doing the delivering. So this makes it really difficult for her to move around. She has to always, you know, consciously think about where she moved. So it's really difficult. So I guess when we talk about what kind of quality of experience, is about the most basic thing is about safety and the comfort of moving. To know that when you get to places, you know you'll be getting there safely. And then the second person that we also talked to is a woman. She's around 50 years old. She was with her grandchild at the time. And then she mentioned about using public transportation. So in Sabah, in Kota Kinabalu, we don't really have efficient public transportation. We only use minibus. It's still minibus here. And then she was talking about pre and post pandemic and during pandemic condition. And she mentioned about how before this, in buses, it used to be really cramped, uncomfortable. And then right now it's much more sparse for her to sit. So interesting to hear also. One thing interesting as well is she mentioned that while using public transportation, she get to have this random interaction among strangers. So, but it's getting harder during the pandemic, of course, because people are much more private, people don't trust each other. So I guess these are the challenges that we have to overcome, the things that we have to think about, and how do we want to further foster this kind of like random interaction, which actually makes city much more livable, much more vibrant. And when we were talking about walking, it's not just walking along. Sometimes probably we bump into people and have start random interactions, which can be very, very interesting. And also I mentioned that she was with her grandchild, and she was really worried about her grandchild running around. But again, in the streets, but again, like this got me thinking as well, like, hey, so meaning our city is not safe for the for the children. Meaning like there's this basic understanding that okay, city is not safe for the children. You cannot run around, like let your children just run freely. But then it's not supposed to be that way. It's children supposed to be able to just going around, move around freely, play around in the city, but feel safe. So this one is referring to the children rights to the city. And I think often we've forgotten about this aspect. When we're talking about community, the first thing that strikes is the adults. It's really that we think about, oh, what do the children need? What do the children think about? Because when we care about our children, meaning we are lessening this worry, among the parents. So there were a lot of other stories as well. We heard from DBKK cleaner, from of course an OKU activist saying how this car dependent city is making it very difficult for him to move around, making him dependent with his family members. So yeah, these kind of stories are important. When we want to improve the quality of experience, we have to talk to the people on the streets. And in general, those are the things: safety, about rights, children rights to the city, of safe pedestrian, public transportation. There are a lot of other aspects as well, but in overall, I think like Yasmin also mentioned, just a lot of things to tackle.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rashidah. Okay, my last question for me to our last panelist before we go to the Q&A. We got a few questions, and we have until 11:30 to end the session. Okay, so what improvements are needed to provide an environment that will enrich the experience of going through our streets in the city?
Okay, before we think about the intervention, whether what to put and what to omit in the design strategy or in the city, we need to think first that we design city for people to live in. That's the main objective. We live in the city because we can't deny the fact that the city is evolving. The rural area will become urbanized. So that's the fact that we have to think about, and the needs of the population. So before we go into the small details, we need to think that in order to live in a city, we need to think about the public realm, the sense of place, sense of belonging. And then in order to achieve that, we have to look from what perspective. We need to think about their behavior, about their psychology, because whatever we design will affect our behavior. Because when we design for a city which is focusing for maybe transportation, so we will have more infrastructure for all those engineering needs. But what about for pedestrian? So you will change their behavior because you force them to use certain infrastructure that they don't want. So that affect their quality of life, their psychology. So this is an issue which we need to look at from many approach in order to enrich this working experience. Then we need to think about the eyes on the street, because like what Rashidah said just now, we want people to talk to strangers. I started to work in KL since the 90s. I use bus mini, the mini bus. I live in Sentul Timur. That was the last train station. During that time, Sentul is not a high-end development, high-end area. So it's quite safe. But now it's different. Even though it's developed, you can see that the demographic is changing. So what are the needs that we need to think about when we design a city? So you have to always think about the changes, because city is a dynamic thing. It evolve. So does people. So we don't have only Malay, Chinese, or Indian, male, female. So we have a different kind of behavior, different kind of types of people who use the street. Because previously maybe we used the street in the 90s or 80s is different. So now people walk and use the street until nighttime. So what is the time frame and what is the needs for every condition. And then we also need to think about the shared space, because we've come out, we've seen findings that shared space is important when we talk about safety, because this is where we have mixed development. We have spaces like, previously we have shop houses, so it's more livable, it's more walkable, and it's safer. Because, and then we need to think about all those simple things like how people feel comfortable, the sidewalk width. Because for example, KL, we have the sidewalk, but do we feel comfortable and safe? So we have to think about the sizes, the landscape, the lighting, and then the maintenance. This is one of the issue that I found from my research. Not only the street, but the building. We can see certain area is not well maintained, and then a certain area is um, fully maintained. And then these two stark contrasts will affect the behavior and will affect the psychology of the user. Because we found that people mentioned that, okay, we don't want to walk or pass by this area because it doesn't look safe. There's too much, the garai is blocking the way, and then there's no lighting, there's garbage everywhere. So these are small things that we need to improve so that people will enjoy walking. Because I remember the first time I reached a train station in Paris, I think it's not safe because I've seen human waste. So that was my first impression. So just imagine, uh, same thing in Malaysia. I think it's almost the same, because the upper part, my example is Chowkit area. So you can see that the upper part of Chowkit, Jalanta, and the lower part is totally different. So that's the different demographic, different mixed use. So these are the things that we need to think if we want to enrich or we want to encourage people to walk. And then we have infrastructure like LRT station, but it is not connected. For example, you have pedestrian bridge. You have a pedestrian bridge, but it is too, you have to walk. It's quite far, and then there's not enough CCTV, and people who are supposed to use that pedestrian bridge did not use, only used by mentally ill. So these are the kind of infrastructure that we share. And then we want to look urbanized, then we provide monorail. But at the same time, we put a big chunk of column on the sidewalk. So instead of we have 1.5 meter sidewalk for pedestrian, we block the sidewalk. It's only less than 1 meter. So I think it's like, you put everything because you want to say that, okay, we are modern country, we are urbanized, we have monorail, we have LRT station, we have KTM, but it's not safe. So this is the problem with Malaysia, because we try to enrich, but we mix up everything along the way. When we talk about shared space as well, we have bicycle lane, but do we properly design the bicycle lane? So sometimes we can see that there's a conflict between cars, bus, bicycle, and pedestrian, because we want to make it like a rojak. We mix everything. So I think before we want to, come up with a perfect a city, we need to think about the root of the problem first before we simply copy from maybe Australia, Japan, or Denmark. We need to think what is our own problem now, because I've seen some of the improvement in Malaysia. We just simply copy, and then when we have an expert view from university, from maybe some experts, we voice up, and then we will not call back for the second session because we voiced out too much.
Mm.
Because maybe they already have a preconceived idea or they already have a plan to execute. So they just want to implement whatever they want or whatever they have read somewhere or case study from overseas. So this is the problem here. We don't solve our own problem, but we just copy, paste and put and think that, okay, we have achieved a livable city and whatnot.
Okay, the rubber stamping syndrome. Copy paste with the rubber stamping syndrome. I think that is actually the root of the problem which needs to be resolved if we really have the political will to do so. Okay, thank you to the three panelists for sharing us your point of view and sharing us your experience about experiencing the city and how urban design impact the lives of the people. Okay, now we come to the Q&A session. Please don't worry because interesting enough we got so many questions in the chat box and I was told that there's an interesting question in the FB, but I will try since we have about 15 minutes before we should end this urban talk. I've got three questions here which is actually quite related and they are actually the best person to answer this will be Suhaila because of the issues raised. So this what I would call it 3-in-1 question. You know, there are three person, Salahuddin, Adi Usaini, and Shah Kamaluddin from Veritas Architect.
Rita, okay.
Reda is a different issue. I'll ask another other. So in these three questions, you know, has there been an effort in proposing new technical standards to Plan Malaysia and JKR to realize this urban transformation, or are we still in the education phase due to lack of political will? The second question is related. When will JKR change the current road standards from wide car-centric roads to a safe, narrow and walkable road suitable for pedestrians and cyclists? Is it perhaps, from Shah, is it perhaps that local authorities still allow generous parking provisions in all the buildings and then penalize when attempts to provide less parking in buildings in the city? And also non-restrictive coming into the city, unlike cities like Singapore that led to all this problem. I think, Sue, I think the question is targeted to you.
Yeah, I read the comment section and I think before we go further, we need to understand that the hierarchy of road and street in Malaysia, not all roads are under JKR.
Yeah.
Certain street, is under local authority and some are under a private developer. And in JKR, okay, I admit that we have a guideline for street, but we are not for, there's no specific categories for women's safety, but we touch a bit about safety. I think there's some improvement that we are doing, but because this is the guideline is too technical, is engineering. It's not on environmental aspect like what we are discussing right now. And then at a different level, we have a strict guideline like in structure plan, in local plan, and then in Johor Bahru, in like Irda. So they have guideline actually for street design. Even under Plan Malaysia, I think JPBD, yeah, there's a guideline for street design. But then in terms of provision of parking, that will need to, we need to check with local authority, because when we talk about city, the implementation is not only by one entity. So there's a private and public sector.
What about this political will from Salahuddin?
Political will, okay. In local authority, the committee, we don't all, the structure or the component of local authority consists of people who work there, a permanent staff, and also from political parties. So these are the people who should voice out or should represent the public. This is their role. I think I haven't seen that one, because maybe their views on the aim is different from what we are discussing, because the expectation is different, and then they are not from the related background. That's a problem, I think.
So okay, there's another question from AR Rida Razak, I think. Do you think local government should have a community engagement guidelines like in Australia and more targeted web-based platform for data analytics harvesting to voice community needs? I think Rashidah would be the more appropriate one to answer this question.
Well, yeah, so far in my experience studying in Australia, we were involved with quite a lot of participatory planning as well. We actually have a whole subject about it. One of it is on community engagement. And yes, I do agree that we should have community engagement guidelines and also targeted web-based platform. But again, like referring back to what Suhaila mentioned, that we should have this localized instead of just copy pasting from other countries. But so far, the things that we can take from the what has been implemented in Australia is pretty good. Like in web-based, people are actually free to just send in their feedbacks about a certain development. So recently there were some disputes about Federation Square in Melbourne. They wanted to do some renovation on it, but it's actually a heritage building. But people are free and actually are given the opportunity and platform to voice out their concern in this web. And also in the web, there are also this like timeline of the project and the things and the plans that they'll be doing. So it's really good because people can actually follow all this project development and also are able to pinpoint on certain things, and there's accountability and also transparency. And then when it comes to community engagement, it's not just the website, but it's also on ground. They actually open booths at certain places and places that are actually have high intensity of people walking through. So people are able to engage during those sessions. So yes, I do believe that it's important to have this collection of data of voices. But again, we have to localize it into our context.
Thank you, Rashidah. I think I will welcome a question live from Architect Mustafa Kamal. Would you unmute and pose your question? Thank you.
Khabar semua, selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I think I've got a few questions, but I think I zoom to one. I think in this agenda about making cities livable for walking, we need to relook at all the design and planning guidelines because we've been using this for the past 50 years and it is always has been car-centric. And I think if you want to follow what Yasmin, what Rashidah is trying to do, and also Suhaila, I always question, for the safety of ladies coming out from the building of tower block office, the setback of 40 feet to the main road is actually very dangerous from a safety point of view. Many things that happen. Most of the cities are actually having the building close to the street in order for them to be able to be monitored, because that's where the CPTED way of doing. And probably we need to relook at all our urban design guidelines for city planning of buildings, that the cars, the front of the building should be pedestrian friendly of entrance rather than car friendly of entrance. In Singapore, they did it in Bras Basah area near the museum, where the cars are actually, and the taxis are all entered from the back lanes. The front is all pedestrian, so you have an easy access. And I just wondered, how does the panel feel and how we can move forward with the local authorities, because Indonesia is certainly, Jakarta especially, moving towards that era where they are having a team of architects in the evaluation of the design that will be proposed by the architects in the development of the city, where they call it the TABG, which is called the Team Architect Bangunan Gedung. Gedung means mixed development. So these 4 architects will actually review the design to ensure that it's actually people-friendly, universal design, and also able to be used and also sustainable for the city. And you can see bicycles and cars work together. This is where Jakarta is moving forward that way. So I would like some comments and also some clarification whether this could be done. And I think if KL cannot do it, mungkin Kota Kinabalu can start it. Mustafa
Okay.
speaking. Thank you.
Thanks, Yarmus, for the question. Yasmin, would you like to respond first?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it's interesting that you're talking about the TABG, and you're right in saying that Jakarta is definitely showcasing some great ideas. And it's. I mean, of course, we're just seeing it from the screen, but even talking to people following social media accounts, it really seems to be something is happening there. You know, that they're following the trend of a lot of cities that are, you know, moving towards, you know, even if it's difficult, we're going to do it. And you talk about the political will aspect being really crucial. But again, I would say, you know, the political will, where does political will stem from? You know, how do we shape political will? What are politicians affected by? I mean, of course, here we have our own political kind of conundrums, but essentially they're supposed to be affected by what people demand, by what people care about, right? So if we want to shift the politicians, we ourselves have to be the ones to say, no, look, this is what we want. And if we were to form something like TABG here, yeah, I think it would definitely start from a bottom-up sort of movement rather than a top-down. If we want to wait for top-down, I think that will cause all sorts of pening kepala lah, who will do it, who's in charge of it, who gets to report it, you know, all these kind of things, having some experience on how decisions are made. I'm not sure if that answers your question specifically, but just some comments on what you said.
Certainly something that we can do.
Okay, just in 1 or 2 minutes, Rashidah, would you like to respond to that question? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Sorry, but I'm not exactly familiar with TLBG, so perhaps it's quite difficult for me to give feedback on that.
Okay, then. Perhaps there's a precedent there for
yeah, exactly. Perhaps we'll look into that. Kota Kita.
Yeah, look into
yes,
Kota Kita
exactly.
could look into it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I've got 5 more minutes. Sorry. Yes,
I would like to add.
Okay.
Yeah, the one that Rashidah mentioned just now about the web-based thing. I think in certain country they have this platform where people can tag location which is unsafe for women. So I think in Malaysia maybe Pereka Bandar with Jane's Walk and Kota Kita, maybe you can collaborate and do something like this, because we can't wait for other people to do it. I think we should start now, start somewhere, start small.
We actually have an app here. I'm trying to find it.
Yeah.
Safety Pin or something. We actually have a Malaysian safety app because, you know, we have very strong women advocacy groups, Women's Aid Organization and Gender. I was lucky to work with a lot of these women groups lately on gender responsive budgeting, gender responsive cities. So the apps are there. But I think, yeah, how do we make it more usable, more user-friendly? Definitely leveraging on groups like Kota Kita and other groups. But yeah, I think we have a lot of apps. It's just making sure they work.
Yeah, that's a very good suggestion. Right now, Kota Kita is actually developing our own application, web portal. For like it's more like a checkpoints in Kota Kinabalu to encourage people to walk, and perhaps that is a good suggestion to insert into the web page as well. Yeah.
I just want to bring up this, sorry, just quickly on like, of course, it's great being online, you get more people, but there's also people that aren't able to be online, you know, and we forget that the older groups, the visually impaired, etc. I mean, I'm just saying that it doesn't always solve our problems as well, right? Like, so, because I think there's a couple of apps by local government or even the Ministry of Local Government where you can complain, you know, have you seen the complaint app? I forgot what it's called now. It's got a funny name.
It's not reliable. I've complained many things. It's not reliable.
I mean, I've heard the other side and they're like, oh, getting too many complaints. What are we supposed to do with these complaints? And I'm like, well, you should have thought of that before you develop the app.
The analysis of the complaint is important. And what are we going to do with the data?
Exactly. And going back
That's
to what you're doing on like sex disaggregated data and making sure that the data represents men and women separately is also really crucial, right?
So, okay, ladies, we really had an interesting talk this morning. They were saying that there is a all women team this morning, but issues that we are discussing actually also touches and also have effect to the to the men as well as to the all the other social groups in the community. So I don't have much time to wrap up, just 1 minute before 11:30. I think if we look at the things that we have discussed this morning, there's a lot of things that improvement that needs to be done to our cities. Not so much just from the policy point of view to guidelines and planning, but goes down to the implementation, execution of the policies, to the actual design on the ground. I mean, the issues that we'll be discussing here cannot be solved just by one person or one group. It's a very complex thing. I mean, it involves people from those on the streets, right, to those who are actually governing the country, or those who are actually making the decisions. But it's better late than never. I mean, or this why we are just talking about cities more just from the basic fulfilling basic needs point of view. But now we're starting to discuss more in terms of quality. What do we get from all the money that's been spent on producing all these policies and reports? You know, how do we actually do like a performance checklist on what happens to these policies? You know, once it's already been endorsed, has it trickled down? Has it really been implemented? I mean, like, you know, crime prevention through environmental design, you know, is something that is already been introduced in the country for quite some time, but we are still facing with lots of crimes, you know, petty crimes on the streets and so forth. And the same goes for now when we talk about sustainable development goals, and you see all the buzzwords, you know, used in the SDG, now is now being written down in the policies and the plans. But can we see the implementation on the ground? And what are the constraints? What are the challenges? Now, these are yet to be seen. But this is not the end of the discussion. Pereka Bandar will always be the society that will champion the needs for the good urban design, and we will always try to voice out the issues that is important pertaining to how to make our cities more livable and having a quality of life to the people. And with that, I would like to thank all our three panelists, Yasmin, Rashidah, Suhaila. Nice to be knowing you, and nice to have an interesting talk today. And I thank all the organizer for this urban talk today. So I wish all of you a good day, happy Saturday. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.